The first light of the alien sun shimmered across the crystalline trees, casting long, prismatic shadows over the soft, moss-like ground. Captain Elias Dorn stood at the edge of the research outpost, staring at the strange world that humanity had only just discovered. The planet, which the team had named Lithera, was alive in a way that no human had ever experienced before. Floating orbs of light hovered like gentle fireflies, and the air seemed to hum with a rhythm of its own. It was beautiful, but it was also dangerous. Elias adjusted the straps of his exploration suit and checked the scanner strapped to his wrist. The signal that had brought them here was faint but unmistakable, an intelligent transmission, unlike anything humans had encountered. The alien civilization responsible for it was advanced, isolated, and completely unfamiliar. Most of his team believed communication would be impossible. But Elias had never been the type to give up. He stepped forward, careful not to disturb the delicate plants. Their leaves glimmered with colors that shifted like liquid light, reflecting his own face back at him in fractured fragments. The team had spent weeks studying the patterns, trying to find meaning in the signals, but every attempt at contact, every word or gesture, had been met with silence. And then he saw her. A figure emerged from the luminous forest, slender and graceful, moving with a fluid elegance that seemed almost unreal. She wore robes that shimmered with the colors of the trees, blending into her surroundings yet standing out at the same time. Her skin had a soft luminescence, and her eyes were wide and curious. Elias froze, unsure whether she had noticed him or not. She stopped a few meters away, tilting her head as if listening to some sound only she could hear. Then, slowly, she began to hum. It was not a sound that could be described as a word. It rose and fell, twisting into patterns that made the air vibrate softly. Elias's heart pounded in his chest. This was no ordinary language. It was music, but it was also a message, and he was determined to understand it. Elias took a deep breath and activated his translator device. It was designed to decode signals, but this was unlike anything it had ever encountered. The device emitted soft pulses of light, mimicking some of the tones she produced. For a moment, she tilted her head, listening carefully, then responded with another sequence of notes. Elias tried to match the rhythm, his fingers trembling as he pressed the controls. For several minutes, they exchanged sounds, each trying to understand the other. The alien princess, as he realized she must be, moved closer. Her eyes were wide, reflecting both curiosity and something else, sadness. He noticed a single tear gliding down her cheek. Catching the light, it made his chest tighten. He wanted to speak, to comfort her, but he knew words would fail. Humans were not naturally equipped to communicate through music. Yet, he persisted. He began to hum softly, mimicking her tones as best as he could. She responded, hesitating at first, then with more confidence. Her notes became longer, more complex, almost as if she were testing him. Elias realized that this was more than a first contact. This was an invitation, a fragile bridge between two worlds, and like any bridge, it required patience and trust. Over the next few hours, he and the princess continued their musical dialogue. The forest around them seemed to respond, the floating lights pulsing in time with their rhythms. Elias noticed that the more he played, the more she smiled, and the less her eyes held sorrow. For the first time, he felt a connection not just to her, but to her entire world. When he finally stepped back, exhausted but exhilarated, the princess retreated into the forest. She did not disappear entirely. Elias could still see the shimmer of her form among the glowing plants. He knew she had not fully trusted him yet, but she had allowed him a glimpse into her world, and that was the beginning. Back at the outpost, Elias reviewed the recordings. The sequences were intricate, almost mathematical, yet they carried emotion in a way that defied logic. His team gathered around, eyes wide with wonder. "Do you really think she understands us?" one of the researchers asked. Elias shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "Not yet. But she's listening. And that's all that matters for now." He spent the rest of the night trying to analyze the musical patterns. He noticed repetitions, variations, and pauses that seemed intentional. There were moments of sadness, hope, and curiosity hidden in the tones. Elias was struck by the depth of emotion. It was not just communication, it was art, and in that art, he saw a reflection of something profoundly human, the desire to reach out, to connect, and to be understood. The following day, Elias returned to the forest. He walked slowly, careful not to disturb the delicate ecosystem. The princess appeared almost immediately, as if waiting for him. Her eyes shone with recognition, and she hummed a greeting that he had learned to mimic. He responded, and a small smile appeared on her face. They spent hours together, exchanging melodies that grew more intricate with each session. Elias realized that this language of music was not just about words, it was about feeling. Each note carried meaning, each pause a thought, and in this strange, beautiful dialogue, he discovered a new way to express the very human emotions of empathy, patience, and hope. Days passed, and their bond deepened. The princess began to approach him without hesitation, and Elias could sense that she was beginning to trust him. Yet there was still a lingering sadness, a quiet melancholy that seemed to weigh on her. He could not ignore it, nor did he want to. This was not just about making contact, it was about understanding her pain, sharing it in a way that only humans could through persistence, compassion, and emotional courage. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the horizon, casting silver light over the forest, the princess sat beside him. She hummed a melody that was slow, almost sorrowful. Elias closed his eyes and listened, letting the sound wash over him. He could feel the grief she carried, the weight of responsibility, and the memories of a world that had suffered. Elias began to hum back, carefully matching her notes, adding subtle variations that conveyed understanding and support. She tilted her head, listening intently. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, her tears stopped. She leaned closer, and Elias could feel the warmth of trust growing between them. It was a small victory, but a significant one. The princess had allowed him to reach her, not with words or technology, but with something more: human persistence, empathy, and the willingness to understand without judgment. Elias realized that this was the essence of humanity. The ability to connect, to bridge differences, and to find common ground, even in the most alien circumstances. By the time Elias returned to the outpost that night, he felt a sense of accomplishment, unlike any he had ever known. The recordings of their interactions were stored, but more importantly, a bond had been formed, one that could not be captured by technology alone. He had found a way to communicate not just with her mind, but with her heart. As he prepared to rest, he reflected on the day. This was only the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, misunderstandings, skepticism from both humans and aliens, and the difficulty of fully grasping a language that was music rather than words. But Elias was ready. He knew that persistence was the key, and he would not give up. Not now, not ever. And somewhere in the glowing forest, the princess hummed a gentle note that seemed to say the same. For the first time in human history, a bridge had been formed between species. Not through force, not through diplomacy, but through something more powerful: the human capacity to care, to persist, and to reach across the impossible. And Elias knew, with a certainty that warmed his soul, that this was just the first step in a story that would change both their worlds forever. The next morning, the air on Lythera felt warmer, as if the planet itself was welcoming Elias back. He woke early, eager to return to the glowing forest where the princess waited. Sleep had done little to dull the excitement that had grown inside him after their first real interaction. He adjusted his suit and carried his portable translator and audio recorder, determined to capture as much as possible. Every note, every subtle tone, could be a key to understanding her language. As he stepped into the forest, the familiar shimmer of crystal leaves surrounded him. The bioluminescent plants pulsed gently, as if breathing along with him. Somewhere above, a cluster of floating lights moved like sentient creatures, their glow reflecting off the soft moss below. He could feel the planet's rhythm, almost as if it were alive and aware of his presence. Then he saw her. Princess Lyra appeared from behind a tall, glowing tree, her movements slow and deliberate. Her eyes locked onto his, and a faint smile curved her lips. She tilted her head slightly and hummed a short sequence of notes. Elias stopped, letting the sound wash over him. He had spent hours studying the recordings from the previous day, learning the patterns, the pauses, the rises and falls. He attempted to match her melody as closely as he could. At first, she hesitated, her notes tentative. Then, slowly, she added more complex sequences. A kind of musical question that invited him to respond. Elias leaned forward slightly, listening, then answered with tones that he hoped conveyed both respect and curiosity. The forest around them pulsed in response. The floating lights moved closer, shimmering in rhythm with their exchange. Elias realized that the entire ecosystem might be attuned to these sounds, responding as though it understood the importance of the moment. Over the next few hours, he experimented with rhythm, pitch, and tone. He learned that the princess used short bursts to convey questions, longer sequences to express emotions, and subtle variations in pitch to indicate emphasis. He tried to mimic her carefully, gradually gaining confidence. Each attempt was met with approval in the form of soft humming, and occasionally a delicate smile that revealed more emotion than any words could. As he worked, Elias noticed something remarkable. Lyra's melodies were not random, they told stories. He heard tones that suggested joy, sequences that hinted at sorrow, and pauses that conveyed hesitation or fear. He realized that she was sharing pieces of her life and her world through sound. And in return, Elias began to improvise simple melodies of his own, adding elements of hope, reassurance, and patience. By midday, the princess had begun approaching him without hesitation. She moved closer than she had on the first day, her glowing form now more comfortable in his presence. She hummed a melody that was soft, almost like a sigh. And Elias responded in kind. The two sounds intertwined, creating a new harmony that neither had used before. It was not perfect, but it was a start, a shared language forming between two completely different beings. Elias decided to take the next step. He wanted to teach her something of his human language, but not words. Not yet. Instead, he used rhythm, tone, and subtle gestures to convey basic ideas. Friend, safe, understand. He hummed a simple tune, then pointed to himself, then extended his hand in a gesture of trust. Lyra tilted her head and hummed back. It was not exactly the human concept of a word, but it carried meaning. Elias could feel her curiosity deepening. He realized that this process required patience. Unlike human children, who learn language quickly through repetition, the princess needed time to associate sounds with meaning, but she was intelligent, careful, and observant. Every small success encouraged him to continue. He had begun to understand that persistence was not just about trying repeatedly. It was about observing, adapting, and respecting the other being's pace. As the sun of Lythera shifted, casting golden patterns across the forest floor, Elias paused to rest. He observed the princess from a short distance. She seemed thoughtful, almost reflective, humming sequences that he could not yet interpret. He felt a pang of frustration, but he reminded himself that this was normal. No human language had been mastered overnight, and this was far more complex. While he rested, he noticed something else. Other members of the alien society were beginning to watch from a distance. Shadowy figures among the glowing trees moved carefully, curious, but cautious. Elias realized that the princess was not the only one listening. Her entire society might be observing his efforts. This knowledge added pressure, but also motivation. If he could gain the trust of this princess, he might earn the respect of her people. He rose and approached the princess again, holding a small device he had built to capture the full range of her tones. As she hummed, he recorded each sequence carefully, then played them back, allowing her to hear herself. She listened, tilting her head, and then repeated the sequence with subtle improvements. Elias laughed softly, realizing that she was learning to communicate with him as much as he was learning from her. Hours turned into days. Elias spent every moment he could in the forest, exchanging melodies and improvising sequences. Each interaction brought small victories. He learned how to ask questions, how to indicate agreement, and how to express comfort. The princess, in turn, began to anticipate his melodies, adjusting her tones to match his. Their conversations were slow, painstakingly deliberate, but they were genuine. One afternoon, a sudden tremor shook the ground. Elias steadied himself, heart racing, as the floating lights scattered and the trees shivered. From the forest edge, he saw a group of alien figures moving quickly. They were not hostile, but cautious, protective of their princess. Elias raised his hands in a gesture of peace and hummed a calming sequence. The princess responded immediately, her melody steadying, sending subtle vibrations that seemed to signal reassurance to her people. The moment passed, and Elias realized something profound. Communication was not just about language, it was about connection, trust, and empathy. His ability to persist, to remain calm, and to show genuine care had prevented potential conflict. For the first time, he felt that humans could offer something unique to this alien world, not technology, not weapons, but emotional intelligence. As evening fell, Elias and the princess rested beside a small, glowing pond. The water reflected the twin moons above, and the forest seemed to hum in quiet harmony. He hummed a slow, gentle melody, one that expressed gratitude and hope. She responded with a delicate sequence, her notes trembling slightly with emotion. Elias felt tears prick his own eyes. He realized that despite the differences between their worlds, they shared something fundamental: the need to be understood, to connect, and to find comfort in another being. That night, back at the outpost, Elias reviewed the day's recordings. He had captured hundreds of sequences, each one a small puzzle piece in understanding her language. But more than that, he had begun to understand her world, its beauty, its sorrow, and its hope. And he understood something else as well: that humanity had a power no technology could replicate. The power to care, to persist, and to bridge gaps between completely different lives. He lay awake that night, thinking about the princess and the forest. He imagined a future where humans and this alien civilization could work together, not out of necessity, but out of mutual respect and understanding. The thought filled him with a quiet determination. He would not give up, no matter how difficult the path ahead might be. He had already seen the first glimpse of trust in her eyes, and that was enough to keep going. In the following days, their interactions grew deeper. Elias began to notice nuances in her tones, hints of memories, expressions of curiosity, and even playful teasing. He responded in kind, improvising melodies that carried humor, warmth, and encouragement. Each new sequence strengthened their bond, and he began to feel that this was more than a mission. It was a friendship, fragile and precious, bridging the gap between two entirely different worlds. The alien princess, once distant and reserved, now approached him willingly. She hummed sequences that seemed to ask questions about his world, about humans, and about the life he had left behind. Elias responded carefully, translating experiences into tones that she could understand. Slowly, he began to feel that he was not just learning her language, he was learning how to communicate hope, empathy, and trust, qualities that transcended words. One evening, as the moons rose high in the sky, Elias played a melody that expressed persistence, the promise to continue, to never give up, and to always try to understand. The princess listened, then hummed back a sequence that made him smile. It was a message of acceptance and encouragement, and it told him, in the only way she could, that his efforts were not in vain. Elias knew that the journey ahead would not be easy. There would be misunderstandings, cultural differences, and challenges he could not yet foresee. But he also knew that this first bond, this fragile trust, had created a foundation. And on Lythera, where every sound carried meaning and every melody told a story, he had discovered something profoundly human: the power to persist, to reach across worlds, and to connect hearts even when minds spoke different languages. And somewhere in the glowing forest, the princess waited, humming softly. A small, but powerful promise that she would continue to listen, to teach, and to trust. Elias smiled, knowing that together they had taken the first step toward something extraordinary. The days on Lythra had grown longer, and Elias found himself immersed in a rhythm he had never known. Every morning he returned to the forest, eager to exchange melodies with the princess. Their bond had deepened, their musical dialogue growing more complex, almost like a conversation. Elias felt a quiet triumph in every note, a sense that he was beginning to truly understand her world. But trust was fragile. The alien society had noticed his presence, and whispers rippled through the forest like invisible currents. Shadowy figures watched from a distance, their movements careful, hesitant. Elias knew that while the princess had begun to trust him, others might not. The aliens' culture was deeply protective, cautious of outsiders, and he had to navigate their scrutiny with care. One afternoon, as Elias hummed a sequence that expressed hope, a sudden rustle in the undergrowth made him pause. From behind a thick cluster of glowing plants emerged 3 alien figures. Unlike the princess, they moved with authority and purpose. Their forms shimmered with the same bioluminescence, but their presence carried an unmistakable tension. The princess stepped forward, humming a soft note that seemed to plead for patience. Elias raised his hands, trying to convey peace. The 3 aliens responded with a series of sharp tones, which his translator device struggled to interpret. He realized that they were questioning him, testing his intentions, assessing whether he was a threat. Elias took a deep breath and began to respond in the language of music he had learned from the princess. He chose tones that expressed honesty, patience, and respect. He added a rhythm that suggested collaboration rather than dominance. The aliens hesitated, their bodies vibrating subtly as they listened. The princess hummed softly, reinforcing his message with her own notes. Slowly, the 3 figures relaxed, and one of them approached with a gesture that seemed to signify acceptance. Elias felt a surge of relief. Trust had extended beyond the princess, reaching her protectors as well. Yet he understood that this was only the beginning. The aliens' caution was not a sign of hostility, but of care, a culture that valued precision and understanding above all. To succeed here, he had to be patient, observant, and respectful of every nuance. In the following days, Elias continued to learn. He discovered that the princess's language was not linear like human speech. Instead, it relied on layering tones, overlapping rhythms, and subtle shifts in pitch to convey meaning. A single sequence could express multiple emotions at once: curiosity and caution, hope and sorrow, joy and longing. Elias was amazed at the complexity and beauty, realizing that this was more than a language. It was a reflection of a culture that valued harmony, balance, and emotional intelligence. One day, as they shared melodies beside a glowing pond, the princess hummed a sequence that Elias had never heard before. It was fragmented, trembling, almost like a cry. He felt her emotion instantly: fear, uncertainty, and the weight of responsibility. Elias responded carefully, adding a steady rhythm that suggested reassurance and understanding. She paused, listening, then repeated the sequence with subtle variations. Elias realized she was testing him, seeing if he could truly empathize with her emotions. He played a longer sequence, layering tones that expressed persistence, patience, and encouragement. Slowly, the tremble in her melody eased, and her notes began to flow more smoothly. She leaned closer, almost touching him, and Elias felt a profound connection. In that moment, he understood that this was the essence of trust: being willing to bear the emotional weight of another being without judgment. Despite these victories, challenges arose. Other members of her society, more distant and less familiar with him, began to observe his interactions with suspicion. One morning, Elias noticed a small group of aliens approaching as he and the princess exchanged tones. Their melodies were sharp and questioning, almost accusatory. Elias knew that a misunderstanding here could escalate quickly. He took a deep breath and focused on calm, deliberate melodies. He mirrored their rhythms, showing respect, and added tones that conveyed peaceful intentions. The princess joined in, her notes reinforcing his message. For several tense minutes, they stood in this musical standoff. Then, slowly, the alien group responded with softer tones, signaling that they were listening, if not yet fully trusting. It became clear to Elias that trust was earned not just through success, but through persistence and patience. The aliens' caution was a reflection of their culture, one that valued careful observation and deliberate action. By continuing to communicate through music, through empathy and creativity, Elias was demonstrating qualities that technology or weapons could never replicate. Humanity had something unique to offer: the ability to persist, to care, and to bridge differences through understanding. As days turned into weeks, Elias and the princess continued their dialogue, exploring deeper layers of meaning. She shared sequences that hinted at the history of her people, their struggles, their triumphs, and their dreams. Elias listened, absorbing every detail. He responded with tones that suggested hope, reassurance, and admiration for their resilience. Through these exchanges, he began to see the alien world not as a challenge to conquer, but as a partner to understand. One evening, as the twin moons rose, Elias noticed that the princess seemed more hesitant than usual. Her melodies were cautious, fragmented. He listened closely and realized that she was conveying a warning, perhaps a danger nearby, or a challenge within her society. Elias remained calm, responding with careful, measured tones that suggested readiness to cooperate and trust. The princess hummed back, slowly, then allowed him to follow her deeper into the forest. They reached a clearing where a small council of aliens waited. Elias could sense their wariness. The princess stepped forward. Using a series of notes that Elias interpreted as an introduction, he responded, layering tones that expressed humility, respect, and a willingness to communicate. The council listened, their sequences sharp at first, then softer as they absorbed his intent. For hours, they exchanged melodies. Elias realized that this was a critical test, not of language, but of character. The aliens were evaluating whether he could embody the values of empathy, patience, and persistence that had won the princess's trust. By responding thoughtfully, respectfully, and creatively, he slowly earned the council's acceptance. By nightfall, the council had relaxed, their tones harmonizing with the princess's gentle sequences. Elias felt a profound sense of accomplishment. He had bridged not just a language gap, but a cultural and emotional one. The princess looked at him, her eyes reflecting gratitude and relief. Through persistence and creativity, humanity had shown its strength in ways that technology alone could never achieve. The next days were quieter, allowing for reflection and deeper learning. Elias began to experiment with combining human melodies with the princess's sequences, creating shared compositions that carried meaning for both species. He discovered that music could convey subtle emotions, curiosity, encouragement, and even humor. The princess responded with playful variations, indicating that she appreciated the effort and creativity. Elias realized that their shared music was more than communication, it was connection. It transcended the barriers of species, culture, and experience. Through these melodies, he could express compassion, trust, and determination. And in return, the princess shared her world, her emotions, and her hope. Yet, despite these successes, Elias knew challenges were ahead. He had glimpsed the cautious nature of her society, the protective instincts of the council, and the potential for misunderstandings. But he also knew that persistence, empathy, and creativity were the tools he needed. Technology alone could not bridge the gap, but humanity's emotional intelligence could. One evening, as the twin moons cast silver light across the forest, Elias sat beside the princess by a gently glowing pond. He hummed a melody that expressed patience, trust, and the promise to continue their work. She listened, then responded with a sequence that trembled slightly with emotion. Elias felt tears prick his own eyes. They were not tears of sorrow, but of shared understanding. a silent acknowledgement of the bond they had built. Elias understood that this bond was more than a personal victory. It was proof that humanity could reach across worlds, connect with beings who seemed entirely alien, and create understanding where there had been only silence. It was a bridge built not of force or dominance, but of persistence, empathy, and the courage to try again when others might give up. And somewhere in the glowing forest, the princess hummed softly, a note that carried trust, encouragement, and hope. Elias smiled, knowing that together, they had achieved something extraordinary. They had begun to show what humans could do at their best, not through technology or power, but through heart, determination, and the ability to persist through difficulty. The journey was far from over. Misunderstandings, cultural differences, and challenges would come. But Elias knew that they had laid the foundation. Humanity's strength was not in conquest, but in connection. And on Lythra, amid the glowing trees and floating lights, that truth shone brighter than any technology or weapon could. Elias hummed one last sequence for the night, a melody of patience and hope, and the princess responded in kind. As the forest settled into quiet, he realized that this was the start of something larger. A partnership between worlds, founded on trust, creativity, and the uniquely human ability to persist, care, and understand. For the first time, he truly believed that humanity could bridge the impossible and leave a lasting mark not through domination, but through compassion and persistence. And in that moment, amid the glowing forest of Lythra, Elias felt that he was exactly where he was meant to be. The forest of Lythra glowed softly under the twin moons, the floating lights drifting gently like stars brought to earth. Elias moved through the luminous trees with a sense of purpose he had never felt before. Weeks of persistence, learning, and shared melodies had built a fragile bridge between humanity and the alien world. But he knew that today would test everything he and the princess had achieved. The princess waited in a clearing, her slender form shimmering in the soft light. Her eyes met his, and she hummed a delicate melody that carried both anticipation and trust. Elias responded carefully, adding tones that expressed readiness and respect. Today, they would present their connection not just to each other, but to the entire council, and, ultimately, to her people. The council had called for a formal gathering. Elias had been nervous at first, uncertain how the aliens would react to a human attempting communication. But the princess had insisted. She trusted him, and she wanted her people to understand that humanity was not a threat, but a potential ally. Elias adjusted his translator device and carried a small instrument he had brought to blend human melodies with the alien sequences. It was a symbolic gesture, showing that cooperation and understanding could create harmony between worlds. As he entered the larger clearing where the council and other aliens waited, Elias felt their eyes upon him. Their glowing forms pulsed with curiosity and caution. He began by humming the first sequence he had learned from the princess, simple and deliberate. Then he added human variations, slight changes in pitch, subtle rhythms that conveyed hope and respect. The aliens paused, listening carefully. The princess joined him, layering her tones with his. Together, their melodies intertwined, creating something entirely new, a shared song that spoke of trust, patience, and understanding. The council responded with cautious harmonies, testing him, probing for sincerity. Elias adjusted, adapted, and continued. Slowly, the music shifted from caution to acceptance. The alien tones became warmer, more fluid. The council was listening, and more importantly, they were beginning to understand. One of the elder aliens stepped forward, her notes deliberate and measured. She hummed a sequence that carried both challenge and curiosity. Elias responded with tones that expressed humility and perseverance. He added a rhythm that suggested collaboration rather than dominance. The elder paused, then repeated a softer variation. Elias realized that this was their way of acknowledging his intentions. The bridge was forming. As the melodies continued, other aliens began to approach. Some curious, others hesitant. Elias and the princess worked in harmony, their combined sequences creating a language that could be felt as much as it was heard. He realized something profound. The success of this interaction did not rely on technology or authority. It relied on persistence, empathy, and creativity, the very qualities that defined humanity at its best. Hours passed as they performed this musical dialogue. The forest seemed to respond. The glowing plants pulsing in rhythm with their melodies, the floating lights moved closer, circling above like protective spirits. Elias felt a deep sense of connection, not just to the princess or her council, but to the planet itself. Lythera seemed alive in a way that humans rarely experienced. Attuned to trust, understanding, and emotional resonance. Finally, the elder alien hummed a long, flowing sequence that echoed across the clearing. Elias listened carefully, recognizing it as approval, perhaps even gratitude. The princess responded with a joyful, trembling melody that spoke of relief and hope. Elias added his own sequence, simple yet sincere, expressing the promise to continue building understanding between their worlds. The council members shared soft, harmonious tones, signaling acceptance. Elias realized that the initial barriers, fear, suspicion, and cultural differences had been overcome through patience, persistence, and empathy. Humanity had shown its value not through force or superior technology, but through emotional intelligence, creativity, and the courage to reach out across the impossible. In the following days, the humans and aliens began a cultural exchange. Elias helped teach human melodies to other members of the alien society, while learning more of their language in return. The process was slow, painstaking, and beautiful. Together, they discovered ways to combine human instruments with alien sounds, creating music that could express complex emotions in ways neither species could achieve alone. The princess spent hours with Elias, sharing sequences that conveyed the history of her people, their dreams, and their fears. In turn, he shared human stories, tales of exploration, invention, and hope. They communicated not just through words or sounds, but through emotion, gestures, and shared experience. Each melody built understanding, trust, and friendship. Elias noticed changes in the alien society as well. The initial skepticism and caution softened. Aliens who had watched from a distance began to participate, contributing their tones and sequences. They experimented with combining rhythms, sharing ideas, and expressing curiosity. The forest became alive with music, a celebration of collaboration and connection. One afternoon, the princess led Elias to a grove of crystalline trees that glowed brighter than any he had seen. She hummed a sequence that was hesitant at first, then grew strong and confident. Elias listened, recognizing the emotion behind it: pride, gratitude, and hope. He responded with a melody of his own, simple yet powerful, conveying the message, "We will continue together." She tilted her head and hummed a short note that felt like laughter. Elias realized it was the first time she had expressed joy so openly in their shared language. The sound filled him with warmth. He had helped her find a voice that could blend with his own, and through that, she had begun to express herself freely, without fear or hesitation. As weeks passed, Elias and the princess's bond became a symbol of unity for both species. Other humans and aliens joined their musical sessions, sharing experiences, knowledge, and ideas. Technology was combined with creativity. Art merged with science, and understanding blossomed where fear had once stood. Elias marveled at the result. The alliance they had built was not just political or technological, it was emotional, profound, and enduring. One evening, under the light of the twin moons, the princess hummed a long, flowing sequence directly to Elias. He listened carefully, feeling the layers of meaning in her tones. She expressed gratitude, admiration, and something he had never expected: trust in humanity as a whole. He responded with a melody that carried hope, persistence, and the promise to continue their work together. In that moment, Elias understood the true essence of what humanity could offer. They had no special powers, no advanced control over the universe's forces, but they had heart, creativity, and the courage to persist. These qualities had bridged a gap no technology could overcome. They had reached across the stars and connected with another civilization on a deeply emotional and intellectual level. The forest seemed to hum along with them, the glowing plants and floating lights reflecting the harmony of their combined efforts. Aliens and humans alike gathered, participating in a spontaneous symphony that celebrated trust, cooperation, and the joy of understanding. Elias realized that this was a milestone not just for him or for the princess, but for humanity. They had proven that their strengths were not measured by power, but by empathy, perseverance, and creativity. As the final notes faded into the night, the princess looked at Elias, her eyes reflecting both tears and joy. She hummed one last sequence, simple but full of meaning. Persist. Trust. Connect. Elias responded, smiling, knowing that the message was mutual. They had built something lasting, something that would continue to grow long after he returned to Earth. That night, as Elias lay in his quarters at the outpost, he thought about the journey they had shared, from the first hesitant hums to this night of shared symphony. Every step had been a lesson in patience, creativity, and courage. Humanity had reached across the impossible, and in doing so, had discovered a new way to define its strength. He knew the challenges ahead were far from over. There would be misunderstandings, conflicts, and tests of trust in the future. But he also knew that the foundation had been laid. The bridge between humans and the people of Lythra was strong, built not with force, but with heart. As he drifted to sleep, he could hear the faint echoes of the princess's melody drifting through the forest, a reminder that persistence, empathy, and understanding could create harmony even between the most different worlds. Humanity had left its mark, not with conquest or technology, but with the qualities that made it uniquely human. And somewhere in the glowing heart of Lythra, the princess smiled, humming softly. She had learned to trust, to hope, and to connect with another species in a way that no one had thought possible. Together, they had begun a story that would continue long after their first melodies had faded, a story of friendship, understanding, and the remarkable power of persistence. Elias knew that wherever humanity went next, whatever worlds they touched, they carried this lesson with them. Technology could build cities, machines could travel the stars, but only humans could build bridges of empathy, hope, and trust. Only humans could sing across the impossible and be heard. The forest of Lythra pulsed softly with light, the floating orbs drifting lazily through the air. Elias closed his eyes, listening to the harmony of the planet and the melody of the princess. Together, they had shown what humanity could achieve. Together, they had begun a new chapter, not just for humans or aliens, but for all who dared to connect across worlds. In the silence that followed, Elias felt a profound certainty. Humanity's strength was in its persistence, its creativity, and its heart. And in the glow of Lythra's forest, he knew that the bridge they had built would endure, carrying their shared story of hope, trust, and understanding to every corner of the universe they could reach.